You see, most people expect a collapse to look like an explosion, loud, obvious, and instant. But that's the illusion we've been sold. Real collapses, the ones that truly dismantle empires, don't begin with a bang. They start quietly. They're silent declines wrapped in everyday routines. The truth is, the US dollar isn't collapsing tomorrow. It's collapsing today. And it has been for months, even years. You just haven't noticed because no one wants you to. The FI. Signs are all there, hiding in plain sight. Take a closer look, and you'll see that this so-called strong dollar is bleeding value every day, silently draining the purchasing power of every paycheck, every saving, every retirement fund that people trust to carry them into the future. Let's talk numbers. Since January 2025, the dollar index has dropped by more than 10%. That's not some random dip. That's a deep wound in a global financial system built around the illusion of American monetary dominance. Meanwhile, inflation is no longer a headline, it's a lifestyle. You go to the grocery store, you fill your gas tank, you renew your insurance, and you feel it. Every dollar you spend buys less. And while the Federal Reserve talks about cooling inflation, the dollar keeps quietly shrinking, not just in value, but in trust. Behind the curtain, big players have started their exit. Central banks around the world are cutting their dollar reserves. They're hoarding gold, buying up foreign currencies, and creating bilateral trade deals that completely bypass the greenback. And yet here, at home, you're told that everything is under control. That markets are adjusting, that this is just a cycle. But deep down, you know that something is off. People are working more and affording less. Families are budgeting down to the last penny. Investors are becoming survivalists, shifting their portfolios into hard assets, real estate, and digital currencies, trying to outrun something they're not allowed to name. A slow-motion collapse. Even the credit rating agencies, those deeply conservative institutions that rarely move until after a storm, have started to flinch. Moody's downgrade of U.S. debt earlier this year wasn't just about numbers. It was a warning. Trust in the U.S. economy is fading. Foreign investors are watching Washington's spending like a hawk. They're not interested in what America says. It's what it does. Trillions in debt, ballooning deficits, unsustainable promises. And what backs the dollar now? Not gold, not productivity, just faith. And when that faith breaks, the system breaks with it. And yet, the headlines keep us distracted. We're told the market is strong, unemployment is low, and the economy is resilient. But none of that matters if the foundation is cracked. A collapsing dollar doesn't mean your wallet bursts into flames. It means slow, creeping erosion. It means your $100 from last year is worth $90 today and maybe $80 by the end of next year. It means the same salary buys less food, less energy, less future. But the damage is wrapped in convenience. It's silent, almost polite, which is exactly why it's so dangerous. Look back in history. Rome, Britain, the Ottomans, the collapse, always followed the same path. Overreach, debt, denial, and then decline. We're in that cycle right now. Except this time, the empire has nukes, a printing press, and an internet full of noise that drowns out the truth. So you'll hear debates about interest rates, inflation targets, even meme stocks. But no one will talk about the slow suicide of the dollar. Because the truth is unsettling. And if the public realized it, if they truly understood what's happening beneath the surface, the system would panic. But you deserve to know. You deserve to see past the slogans and into the structure. Because this isn't just about finance, it's about freedom. A weakened currency is a weakened nation. It's a future mortgaged without consent. It's generations who will inherit debt instead of opportunity. And while Wall Street buys time and Washington buys votes, you're left with the bill, quietly, daily, relentlessly. So if you felt the weight of your money getting lighter, you're not imagining it. If you've wondered why your efforts aren't stretching as far as they used to, you're not alone. It's not just inflation. It's not just markets. It's a system that's been allowed to rot while pretending to shine. And the dollar, the centerpiece of that illusion, is quietly fading. That's not a prediction, it's a process. And we're already living in it. Now, if the collapse of the dollar was just an internal issue, some misstep in policy or a temporary inflation surge, it might be something we could fix with time. But what makes this even more dangerous is that it's no longer just about America. The world is walking away from the dollar. Slowly, deliberately, and with increasing confidence. And no one in power seems willing to admit it. You see, for decades, the US dollar wasn't just money. It was the language of global trust. It was the currency oil was traded in, the currency that backed reserves, that settled trade, that built empires. But that trust is fading, quietly, strategically. And once it's gone, rebuilding it won't be as simple as printing more paper or giving more speeches. This shift didn't happen overnight, but it's accelerating now. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have formed a clear alliance that no longer wants to rely on the US dollar. They're crafting new payment systems, working on a new unified currency backed by tangible assets like gold and oil. And it's not just political posturing anymore. It's already in motion. Bilateral trade deals between Russia and China, between India and Iran, and now even Saudi Arabia are being settled in yuan, rupees, and even local currencies. These aren't just headlines, they're tremors before the quake. Now imagine what happens when the rest of the world starts realizing they no longer need the dollar to function. It's like pulling a thread from a sweater. The unraveling begins slowly, but once enough tension is gone, the whole thing falls apart. For decades, America was able to run up enormous debts, print trillions, and still hold global power because of one thing: demand for the dollar. That demand is what kept interest rates manageable, inflation tolerable, and deficits from destroying confidence. But when that demand dries up, when foreign countries no longer want to hold dollars, the consequences become immediate and sharp. Borrowing becomes more expensive. Imports become pricier. The entire economic engine starts sputtering. And we're seeing that now. Central banks across Asia, Africa, and even Latin America are diversifying their reserves, moving into gold, euros, and even digital assets. China has quietly become the largest buyer of gold over the last few years, not because it wants to decorate vaults, but because it's preparing for a world beyond the dollar. And when you pair that with declining US influence and mounting political instability, it becomes clear. The rest of the world is preparing for something America refuses to acknowledge. They're preparing for the post-dollar era. Even allies are hedging their bets. France recently completed a gas deal with China using yuan. That's a NATO country choosing not to use dollars for energy trade. Why? Because they're watching what's happening too. They've seen how the weaponization of the dollar, freezing reserves, sanctioning countries, has turned it from a neutral reserve currency into a geopolitical tool. And when a tool becomes a weapon, people look for alternatives. But this isn't just about strategy. It's about survival. Countries around the world are tired of being tied to US monetary policy. When the Fed prints trillions, it doesn't just affect Americans. It destabilizes currencies in Africa, inflates food prices in Asia, and raises debt burdens in South America. So naturally, those countries are asking, why should we keep playing a game where we don't set the rules? And here's the most important part. They're no longer just asking, they're acting. Digital currencies, regional trade blocs, local clearing systems, these are all mechanisms being built right now to bypass the dollar. And every new agreement, every new system, chips away at the dollar's dominance. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when the tipping point arrives. Yet in the US, we're still pretending that nothing's changed. Still talking like the dollar will rule forever. Still believing that because it's always been this way, it always will be. But history says otherwise. Every dominant currency in history, Spanish silver, the British pound, Roman coinage, has eventually lost its throne, not always because of war or chaos, but because of overreach, complacency, and global shifts in trust. The dollar is not immune to that. It's vulnerable now more than ever. And the world is ready to move on with or without America's permission. You can already feel the change, even if it's not in bold headlines. Markets are jittery, nations are cautious, and those with the power to see what's coming are already making moves to protect themselves. But most everyday people are left in the dark, fed stories of stability, while the floor quietly shifts beneath them. That's the danger. Because when the collapse finally becomes visible to the masses, it won't be gradual anymore. It will feel sudden, sharp, inevitable, even though it was predictable all along. You don't need to be an economist to feel what's happening. You don't need a degree in finance to know that your money isn't stretching like it used to. Because every day, in real time, Americans are feeling the pressure of a weakening dollar in the most personal way possible. At the checkout counter, at the gas pump, when paying rent, buying medicine, or trying to save for something as simple as a family trip or an emergency fund. This isn't just about currency markets and central banks anymore. This is about life. This is about you. And while the headlines talk about interest rates and market corrections, they rarely mention the truth that's staring us all in the face. The dollar is losing its power, and we are the ones paying the price. Think about it. How often do you leave the store with fewer bags than you used to, despite spending the same amount, or even more? How often do you swipe your card, glance at the receipt, and wonder where all that money just went? You haven't changed. Your effort, your hours, your work, they've stayed the same, maybe even increased. But the value of what you earn is shrinking, almost invisibly. And the most troubling part is, no one tells you it's happening. Instead, they blame supply chains, corporate greed, foreign wars, or seasonal fluctuations. But the truth is, your dollar simply isn't buying what it used to. That's not a coincidence. That's a symptom. The reason this feels so confusing is because it's not just about rising prices. It's about declining purchasing power. That's the real collapse. It's not dramatic. It's not televised. It's quiet and constant. And it affects the most vulnerable first. Fixed-income retirees, single parents, minimum wage workers. These are the people hit hardest when the dollar weakens. But eventually, it reaches everyone. Middle-class families start cutting out small luxuries. College students work 2 jobs just to stay afloat. Even high earners begin to notice the weight of inflated living costs. It's not about poor budgeting. It's about systemic erosion. The consequences ripple through every aspect of daily life. Groceries that once cost $100 now total $140. Car. Insurance rates climb even though you've filed no claims. Rent spikes even when wages don't. And while politicians argue over whose fault it is, everyday people are forced to make choices they shouldn't have to make. Choosing between nutritious food and lower prices, between saving for the future or just surviving the week. This isn't living. This is coping. And let's not forget debt. As the value of the dollar falls, interest rates rise. Credit card bills get more expensive. Mortgages stretch tighter. Student loans hang heavier. The cost of borrowing climbs, while the value of your repayments sinks. It's a trap, a slow tightening of economic chains, and most people don't even see it happening, because it doesn't come all at once. It arrives in inches. A dollar here, a price hike there. Until one day you look up and realize the lifestyle you once maintained is now out of reach. You're not imagining it. You're not failing. You're being failed by a system that refuses to acknowledge the reality you're living in. Financial. Reports boast about stock market highs, GDP growth, and employment numbers. But what do those mean when a working person with 2 jobs still can't afford basic health insurance? What do those numbers matter when families can't build savings, can't buy homes, can't dream beyond their next paycheck? This isn't just an economic issue. It's an emotional one. It's a dignity issue. Because money is not just currency, it's time, it's effort, it's freedom. And when that money weakens, So does your ability to live the life you've worked for. All of this is happening while the institutions we trust tell us it's temporary, or under control, or necessary. But what they don't explain is how temporary inflation becomes permanent when your income doesn't adjust, or how controlled interest rates still choke small businesses and crush first-time buyers. They don't mention that while the dollar drops, the real winners are those who already own assets, stocks, real estate, gold. Because as the currency loses value, those assets rise. That's the game. That's why the rich get richer in economic crises. They're not smarter. They're just positioned differently. And the average person, they're kept too distracted, too burdened, too exhausted to reposition themselves. So the question becomes, who's looking out for you? The politicians? The media? The banks? Or are you expected to just accept it, adjust quietly, and move along? Because that's what's been happening. And it's not just unfair, it's unsustainable. A strong nation cannot survive on a weak dollar and a broken middle class. A society cannot thrive when its people live under constant pressure. This isn't just a financial red flag. It's a warning sign that the very structure of daily life is under threat. We're not just talking about numbers on a chart. We're talking about real people, real pain, real consequences. And the longer we ignore that reality, the deeper this damage spreads. Because when a currency weakens, it doesn't just reduce value, it reduces trust. And once that trust is gone, rebuilding it becomes a battle far greater than anything we've prepared for. So now the question is, what do you do? What can you do when the value of your money is slipping through your fingers and the systems designed to protect you seem more interested in preserving themselves? It's easy to feel powerless. That's how the system is designed, to make you believe that financial control is reserved for the experts, the bankers, the policymakers, the people in tailored suits speaking in complicated terms. But the truth is, you have far more control than you think. You just haven't been told how to use it. They don't teach this in school. They don't broadcast it on the news. But while the dollar weakens and traditional advice falls apart, there are still real, concrete steps you can take to protect yourself and your future. It starts with understanding one simple truth. The system was not built to help you win. It was built to keep you playing, to keep you working, consuming, and trusting, without questioning. But that cycle breaks the moment you decide to learn, because knowledge, real financial awareness, is the first layer of defense. Most people wait until a crisis hits before taking action, but by then, it's too late. That's why those who survive and thrive through economic uncertainty are the ones who prepare quietly before the headlines scream panic. One of the clearest strategies is asset diversification. And no, that doesn't mean blindly throwing money into whatever social media calls the next big thing. It means being intentional. The dollar is just one form of value. When it weakens, other stores of value become stronger by comparison. That's why the wealthy shift into hard assets, things that don't evaporate when the market panics. Gold and silver have held value for centuries, not because they're magical metals, but because they're tangible, limited, and immune to printing presses. When currencies crumble, people flee to what can't be printed. Then there's real estate. It's not just about owning property, it's about securing leverage. When currency weakens, hard assets tend to appreciate in dollar terms. That means owning property can actually protect your wealth from being eroded, while renting keeps you exposed. And it's not just about buying a mansion. There are strategies, from house hacking to real estate investment trusts, that allow everyday people to gain exposure without millions in the bank. And of course, in today's world, we can't ignore the digital landscape. Cryptocurrencies aren't just speculative tokens anymore. Bitcoin, in particular, has emerged as a digital store of value that exists outside the control of any central bank. It's volatile, yes, but volatility is not the same as weakness. The dollar is stable on the surface, but rotting underneath. Bitcoin is chaotic on the surface, but fundamentally sound. It's built on code, scarcity, and decentralization. That's why institutions are beginning to buy in quietly, while telling the public it's too risky. You should also be paying attention to global currency trends. If the dollar is losing its throne, what currencies are rising to take its place? Diversifying some savings into stronger, more stable foreign currencies can be a strategic hedge. It's what nations are doing with their reserves. Why not individuals with their savings? But none of this works without mindset. Because perhaps the most important asset you can develop right now is your ability to think independently, to step outside the noise and ask better questions. Financial literacy is no longer optional. It's survival. And it's not about memorizing terms or reading investment guides written in jargon. It's about seeing the patterns, recognizing what's happening before it happens to you. And most importantly, knowing that you don't need to have it all figured out, you just need to start. Step by step, choice by choice. Because even a small shift in how you save, how you invest, how you view money, can change everything. This is what the system doesn't want you to understand. They want passive participants, not informed protectors. But that's where your power begins, when you stop waiting for someone to rescue you and realize that no one is coming. You are the system now. You are the bank. You are the planner. And that doesn't mean you'll get it all right. It just means you'll stop being left behind. And look, this isn't about fear. It's about awareness. It's about resilience. Yes, the dollar is weakening. Yes, the economy is shifting. But you are not helpless. You are not broken. And you're not late. The people who win in uncertain times aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones with the clearest eyes, the calmest hands,